Welcome.
Hey, yeah,
Welcome.
yeah,
We've got
we got
a episode.
I feel like we have not been by ourselves in a while.
That's right.
Guest
Solo
heavy.
run. It's been guest heavy, and we've covered some great topics.
Great. It's
the Enneagram was awesome.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
David Alvis was an amazing listen.
Well, I think we're starting to get clarity of the vision behind the podcast.
Yes.
Right.
And that is,
I think that it is, a great analogy that I heard a coach or a motivational speaker say one time about at a sales event is he says, you want to be the straw that's stirring the drink.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what it is, right? Because we're going to provide a platform to local business owners, but the most exciting thing for me is when we've had two guests on the podcast or somebody reaches out, be like, hey, I listen to your podcast. Give me that guy's number. I need to talk to him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're the catalyst for those two people meeting. Right.
Listen, if there's anything that this podcast has really given me, it's the chance to hear from other local business owners and their really incredible stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned so much. If I think about Brittany or Clint, or just go down the list, David Alvis, there are some amazing people in Shreveport Bossier that are trying to make a difference.
Yep.
That go home and it's hard, it's challenging, it's difficult, and but to know that not only are we not alone, that there's other people doing it here. So it's encouraging, and then also there's a connectivity of now I know Clint in a way that I didn't know him before.
Sure.
Or now I know Brittany's story. Had no clue that she was doing all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And David Alvis said there's a lot of unsung heroes here.
Absolutely.
And he's exactly right.
A lot of stuff behind the scene. He even said, y'all come in and eat. You don't see what it takes to put on a lunch at the smokehouse.
That's right.
Right.
And
There's a lot behind the scene.
You can drive through town and you can see truck after truck after truck, and their logo may be, this towing company or this waste company, or you don't really think about them. You just kind of drive by. But for each one of those trucks, there's a story.
Well, you think of it too, because we've talked about this on previous episodes, Enneagram 7, my bad side can come out. Typically happens when I'm getting bad service somewhere. My expectations aren't getting met, right? And I have to catch myself, because the truth is the person at the top of that organization, they're not trying to ruin my day, right? I mean, they're busting their butt just like I am to try to provide a service to make an income to provide for my family, right? And so, but what we see is the very end of it, and maybe sometimes it falls short of expectations and it's not implemented right. But then, you just have to think through that lens. You're right. Because I think that's really the dark side of social media, is that we have a power to literally destroy a company.
That's right.
By sending one message.
Yeah.
And you're like, so, you have somebody like David who has 500 employees, and one of those employees is going to have a bad day on one day, and your experience won't be exactly what you wanted, and then you're just going to go hammer them on Facebook.
Exactly.
Right? And it's like, just think twice, because really you're hurting our city, right? Because David how much money is he bringing back in? 500 people employed. That's insane.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly right. And I had an incident of this recently where, a customer had a experience that fell short. Mm-hmm. And man, I take all these things real personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like a bad Google review is like the worst day of my year.
Oh yeah.
And my wife and brother always they just make so much fun of me about it because I take it so personally.
Yeah.
But so what I don't like about it is that it's hard for you to actually talk to them. Mm. And so it's not like, hey, reach out to me here. Sometimes people will just post it and they'll ghost it. And so you got no chance to connect back.
Yes.
But this particular person, after I did several hours of detective work, I found them. And I just called him. Yeah. And I'm sure he's thinking like, how did you find me? I was like, well, listen, man, if I take this very seriously. And so I reached out to him. We had a great conversation.
Yeah.
You know what? He basically was like, look, man, I love coming here. I don't want to have to stop coming here, but here's what happened. Yeah. And I said, well, look, so that's on us. And we've got an opportunity to fix it for you. Yeah. Thank you for letting me at least try to fix it. Yeah. Because if somebody makes that bad review about one of your companies and you don't ever even have a chance, I mean, you can respond and say what Google tells you to respond, which is like, oh, we're so sorry you had a bad, and that doesn't doesn't represent us. All that stuff. But like at the end of the day, you want to actually deal with the person and try to fix the issue.
Sure.
So I had that opportunity. I do believe that it was corrected, and I feel like that now, in a sense, there's more loyalty between our relationship with that customer.
Yeah.
Because he's got my cell phone number now.
Yeah.
And if you got a problem, you call me.
Yeah.
Like I want to make sure that when you come in, that we take care of you. At a very high level.
Yeah. It is a cowardly approach, right? To hide behind a keyboard. I'm like, look, the bottom line is we're all humans. And, obviously maybe there are some companies that warrant a bad review.
Absolutely.
Right? But, for me, it's like, have you tried to talk to the manager? Have you gotten perspective on it? Is there any sort of empathy, right?
Right.
And if this happens 20 times in a row and they refuse to acknowledge it or fix it, I mean, I understand that, right?
Yeah.
And you can speak with your words, or you can just speak with your money and not go there anymore.
Correct.
Right?
And sometimes that's the way it's done.
That's the way it's done. Yeah.
They don't tell you anything. They just never come back.
Yeah. And so, I think that if you're talking about local businesses, especially in our area where people tend to be friendlier than other parts of the country, if you go and say, hey, this happened and, this is how it affected me.
Yeah.
And they're going to be very quick to apologize. And look, it helps the business get better.
That's right.
Right? Because a lot of times the person at the top or the manager doesn't know it even happened. Mm-hmm. Right.
And that person who's maybe taking care of the customer, they may be doing a great job of representing the core values, or on that day they may be doing a pretty lousy job representing those core values. Yeah. And that was in that moment what I was trying to communicate is that, hey man, this is, we don't train it this way, we don't do it this way. Yeah. We but let me fix it. Yeah. And all you want in that moment for that bad Google review, here's all I want, Google. Yeah. Google, if you're listening, and I'm sure they are.
They are.
They don't care, but they're listening.
Sure. Google Maps.
If you're listening, it's like, hey man, when we get a bad review, give us a chance to connect with that customer so we can try to fix it.
Yeah.
That's all you want. I want a chance to try to fix it.
Yeah. Look, if you can suppress speech, you can suppress reviews, okay?
And it feels unfair, right? Sometimes it's unfair. Like sometimes they hit you for things that really are just somebody's own.
And here's my number one advice to business owners is, if you're doing business and you're doing a lot of business, which your companies are, my companies are, I can't tell you right now where my vans are at or what appointments my people. I mean, they're an extension of me, but I don't know where they're at. I mean, I've given them, they have free reins to go do some stuff. It's going to happen. There is going to be a bad experience.
Yes.
That does not meet expectations. Unless you are literally the only person in your company, right? It's going to happen. As soon as you have two people in your company, a bad experience is going to happen. It's inevitable. The only way to deal with bad reviews, the best way to deal with bad reviews is to bury them with positive reviews. The people that are inclined to go leave you a review are people that had a bad experience. Mm-hmm. Very rarely is somebody like, you know what, man, this soda that just got fixed for me is unbelievable. I am going right now to leave them a great review. That doesn't happen. Now, what will happen is you can say, hey, how was your experience? And if they say it was great, say, hey, you know what? It would really help us as a small company if you would leave us a good review. Would you do that for us? I'm going to send you a link. Would you do that for us? Right. And so then you get to where you're burying those bad reviews. So if you have 150 positive reviews and then one bad experience happens, it's not going to be bad, right? And that's one of the things that my companies, you can see some of my companies have only been around 2 or 3 years, and we're just outperforming all of them on Google because we have hundreds of positive reviews, because that's part of our IPAs. Introducing the topic.
A real pro here, folks.
I didn't think about that till just now, because you said something about IPAs, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't like those dark beers.
That's but listen, I really appreciate, and you have some great reviews of your companies.
Yes.
Sometimes I'm kind of taken aback when people, and look, you can't make Google reviews everything. They're not everything, but ultimately consider you're in a town you've never been in before, right? You're driving through, it's lunchtime.
Yep.
What are you doing?
Yeah. Well,
and that's like restaurants near me.
Well, there's two things, right? There's a personality type that is, that doesn't want to take a risk, right? And so they are going to go to what they know. And so they're going to go to Chick-fil-A, Cane's. They're going to go to what they know. Place product packaging, right? Learn that. The only thing I learned in college was that term, place product packaging. Still don't know what it means other than you can order a Big Mac anywhere in the country and it's going to taste the same, allegedly.
We hope.
Okay. So, but yeah, place product packaging. And so there are some people that are not going to want to take the risk. I personally am not that person. Like, I want to, if I'm driving through middle America of a town I've never been in, I'm like, hey, go into a local sandwich shop or a local restaurant is going to give me a taste of what this place is all about.
100%.
You know, they're going to have maybe some things on the menu I haven't tried very much, right? You know, you go to Boston, their menus, you know, not everything's fried like it is here, right?
Chowder, buddy.
You got that clam chowder. You got, I mean, just different things, right? And it's like, well, you know, this. So, but no, you're right. And so that is true. So whenever I'm going through, we're going to, we have a couple trips coming up, me and my wife. And I literally have spent 3 days trying to find the perfect place for us to go to dinner Friday night, right? And I finally found the place last night. But it is, you know, obviously, if it's not at the top of the reviews, I'm not even looking at it.
Yeah. And I've been more aware too, because now the local businesses that I'm shopping at, you know, I try to leave a positive Google review, even if it's just a 5-star, because, you know, that bumps their number up. It bumps their number of reviews up. And it does help them organically with Google search that, you know, again, if you're looking at a restaurant and they've got 10 reviews and they're 3.5 stars, or you've got a restaurant with 100 reviews and they're 4.8 stars, it's a no-brainer. Like, you know, you're just naturally going that direction. So if anybody's listening, I'm like, hey, throw us a review. You know, because it does help smaller businesses to be found.
I was researching, there's a business, I've seen a lot of their signs come up, and somebody had mentioned, well, you know, this place might be wanting for an acquisition, right? So I was just trying to find their website, and, you know, I see their Google page, and they had 11 reviews, 3.0 stars. And this is a well-established, well-known company, does a lot of business. Right. And it's just crazy to me. I'm like, that just has to be. So anyways, I'll let you know this restaurant we're going to. I'll let you know how it goes on the next podcast. But hey, another thing, if you're going to leave a positive review because of us asking you to do it, you know, at your local, wherever, not for our companies, but you go leave a review, just hashtag busy smalls in it, you know. Let's get a little momentum going here. Hashtag busy smalls.
Yeah. We could use some reviews, I think, on the podcast.
Hey.
We could use a few podcast reviews.
Maybe we could start giving out shout outs for review members or review leavers.
I think Google frowns upon, they don't want you to like manipulate it, you know, and say, I'll give you $20 for review. They don't want you to do that.
No. I'm just saying, let's just give them a shout out. Hey, thanks for the review. So and so.
Happy to do that.
Yeah.
Listen,
Mrs. Allen.
Mr. Wood.
Mom.
That's exactly right.
So there we go. But hey, let's see. So we wanted to talk. We have for the next 20 minutes or so, talk about IPAs, not the beer,
not the cold frosty beverage.
No, but IPAs.
What's an IPA? Break it down.
An IPA would be an income producing activity. And the bottom line is this looks different for everybody, right? And I think the higher you go up in an organization, the trickier this can be to identify, right? And so whenever you're at the bottom, you know, an income producing activity is like, hey, be at the register and check people out, or, you know, whatever. If you're in sales, it's like, how many phone calls are you making? Sales is like easy to track IPAs, right? And so I'm in real estate. So my IPAs are like, well, phone calls you're making every day, handwritten notes you're making every day, pop-by visits you're making every day. Reducing a listing price would be an income producing activity because it'll speed up, you know. What are the things that are moving the needle that directly affect the income you're getting? That's what the IPA is.
Here's why I love this concept and why it's been so important to me. I mean, it should be so obvious to everybody, but it's not. Right. So when you think about that real estate agent, or in our case, like an outside sales rep, they can fill their day with so many things.
Yes.
And it could be everything from picking up dry cleaning to taking my daughter
making
to
a flyer,
the park,
posting something on social media,
posting something, or flipping through my phone, doom scrolling.
Yes.
There's so many things you can fill your day with, but at the end of the day, the IPA concept is here to ask you, Leighton Allen, what do you do that actually makes you money?
Yeah. And I think that the biggest enemy of this IPA, or, you know, doing this, is we sometimes confuse busyness with income producing activities. In fact, I could say for most people, I can get, if I just focus on IPAs for 1 hour in a day, I will get more revenue from that 1 hour than I do any of the other hours in my day. Or I could put that up to your 10 hours of busyness, and I'm going to outperform you every single day.
That's exactly right.
Right? Because I'm hyper focused on what's going to make me money. So like in the real estate world, it's like, oh, I'm doing an open house, so I got to make flyers, or I got to do this, right? And so it's crazy to me, because one of the process, you know, in real estate is, we call it contract to close. You get something under contract, well, then you have 30 days, sometimes 60 days to get that to the closing table. Well, all of the stuff in between there is definitely not income producing activities.
Right.
That is busy work. That is paperwork. That stuff's going to get done, right?
Yeah.
The IPA is what got you to get that under contract, right? And that's where the confusion.
The lead measure,
the lead measure,
rather than the lag measure.
Exactly. And so, and that's what, you know, you could have the perfect day in real estate where you have 6 closings line up in one day, and you're going to make $40,000 in commission. But if you didn't do the hour of IPAs, you didn't really work.
That's right. That's right.
You're reaping the benefit of what you did 30, 60, 90 days ago.
That's the shift. The shift is going, you know what, that monthly scoreboard or the commission check or whatever it is nice, and we got to have those things. But ultimately, that's not what we need to be celebrating and focusing on. What we need to be celebrating and focusing on is this IPA. And for that salesperson, it's, how many calls did we make today? How many quotes did we generate? How many, how many lead activities did we participate in? And you said it really good, because I had a really hard time trying to ferret this out for myself.
I'm still figuring it out.
I am too. I am too. But as the coaching that we've been through has been on the same wavelength, ultimately for us, the charge is, no, you need to know what your IPAs are, and then you need to make time every day to make sure that you're actually working on those, rather than that busy work or the thing that don't you find that a lot of times you'll be doing work that you just kind of like to do, and it may not be income producing activity.
100%. I mean, we get, and I always tell, and so this is just kind of going to real estate, and this, hopefully this doesn't come across as offensive, but what I've identified in real estate specifically, the paralyzing, because we know that we have to people, right, in real estate sales or just sales, it's the people business, right? That's what's going to get us the money. They have to make a decision. We have to influence them. But for some reason, we don't want to talk to them, right? We just think like, a cool gimmicky video is going to just make them trust us with a $300,000 purchase, right? Not the case. Yeah. And so they're paralyzed by picking the phone up. And what I found is, for men in my industry, it's because of procrastination. Right? It's just like, they're distracted. They'd rather play a video game or rather whatever they do. And for women, which is a predominantly women heavy industry, it's insecurity. And so you think of that, the coaching between the two is just totally different of what's stopping them from taking that step. Yeah. And frankly, it's a blessing and a curse. We can get business from social media, but the curse is that's usually what leads to insecurity in my industry, is because, you have this dichotomy of where you're comparing your true self that you know about yourself, because you're with yourself all the time, to other people's best
projections.
It's what they're putting on social media.
Exactly.
Right. And that is a lose-lose situation 100% of the time.
Well, and it's impossible not to feel that. Yeah. And for if we're going to say that social media has provided an extra layer of connectivity, and that's a net good to society, maybe we'll see. Yeah. But ultimately,
after Zuckerberg's letter,
right? No, but what you normally see is you see somebody with a projection of a picture that's been curated. of a, I look, I'm no stranger to it. I'm doing the same thing. I'm not putting my worst day on social media going like, hey, look at me.
Yeah.
It's like, no, look, I'm doing this.
I had another bad review.
It's like another bad review,
but didn't meet my numbers this month.
That's right. And so you feel that, you see everybody's best projection, and it's so easy to look at that and go, I'm just not as good as they are, or they're doing much better than I am, they're more successful, or they're prettier, or they're happier, or,
and it can derail you quickly, right? And so I think that's what, when we talk about work or a work day, it has to be defined and structured around what we're talking about, IPAs.
That's right.
And for some industries, it's easy. You can read a book and it'll tell you what they are. For some, it gets harder, right? And so for me, early on, it's a to-do list of actions I'm going to take that's going to do this, right? And so it's the phone calls, the whatever it is. Then as you grow and your team expands and now you have employees, right? So now when we go back to the E-Myth system, you're no longer the technician, you're the manager. And so those IPAs evolve into more of a relational, managing, coaching type role.
Yes.
Of that. Now it becomes more nebulous, right? Yeah. My IPAs become conversations.
Yes.
That is going to motivate someone to go and implement these things.
Right. Well, and two, I'd say it this way. A conversation, absolutely, using what we call the PC model, which is personal conferences, which means that if you've got direct reports, you want to identify maybe an hour every week or every other week where you can sit with them face to face, uninterrupted, and talk on, technical things and then talk on emotional things. And I had not only have we implemented this in our company, I've implemented it in my routines and day as part of my IPAs, but now the managers who are part of my PCs are also doing it with their direct reports. I had the opportunity to take somebody from one store to the other today, and I was really, really just so happy to hear this. I said, well, how's it going with the meetings that you and your manager have been having? And for this person, who's a phenomenal team member, he felt so grateful, and he really appreciated that time, because he said, look, I can go and I can talk to the manager about if I'm having this problem, how do I deal with it? He talks to me sometimes about personal things. He talks to me about, it's a way to show care to that person in the midst of the work that we do. Yeah. And so that has, for him, now he's been unlocked. He's a team supervisor, so he's been modeled this way to approach people, and now he's trying to bring that to the team that he supervises. Sure. So this personal conference model where you sit down with somebody and you really pour into them, try to teach something technical, but try to teach something emotional, understand where they are, sometimes just listening. Like, hey man, my favorite PCs are something like this. What's working? Question number one.
Yeah, what's working?
Question number two, what's not working?
What's not working? Yep.
That's the meeting.
Yeah. Well, I would say a third is, how can I help you?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, what can I do?
Right.
Yeah. And I'll say this, personal conference, probably not the sexiest name.
Well, PC. Okay.
Hey, we might could church it up a little bit.
Okay, look, right? I'm open. I'm open to your suggestions.
Well, let me think.
Yeah, okay.
So
power hour.
Yeah. Another thing for me to neglect my IPAs today. Let me think on that for you. Help you out, buddy. But no, I think you're right. I think that, I always go back to this book, Move Your Bus, and we really, maybe our next episode, we can review that. It's just such a good book. It's such a small book. And I think if you read it, you would really want your leaders to read it. But I think that, because the concept is, on the bus, you're the driver of the bus, and on the bus you have runners, joggers, walkers, and sitters, right? Well, I feel like for my IPAs now are to identify my runners and my joggers, and everything that helps them keep running is an IPA for me. Or everything that takes a jogger and makes them a runner is an IPA for me, right? Yeah. Now, as human, I want to take the sitters and the walkers and really motivate them to become joggers and runners. But that resource, which is my time and energy, is not devoted to them, right? Because if anything, it's is devoted to getting them off the bus.
Yeah.
Because the energy it takes to make a sitter a walker is 10 times more than it is for me to sustain a runner.
Well, and for that runner, I'm experiencing something like this now where that sitter is holding the runner back.
Oh, absolutely.
It's draining them.
Well, they're on the bus and they're saying, I'm running, they're sitting, we're getting paid the same amount of money. Right?
Yeah, something in this, regardless of the situation, is not fair.
And that's why I love always, and I meant to mention it to David, because I always see those cupcakes when I'm walking out, and I'll ask the people behind the counter, I'm like, do y'all push these? And they're like, well, we'll sell them if people ask. I'm like, what if David gave you $1 for every cupcake you would sell? Right? Yeah. And I would be like, that's crazy, right?
You'd be like the cashier at Walgreens pushing those Snickers.
Dude. What's up with that?
They give them some kind of.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah, same.
Nice.
Hey, look, same concept,
thing.
buddy.
But so that's why on all of my, especially if you're entry level, if you're above entry level position, they're tied into some type of IPA or some kind of part of their pay structure is, okay, if I move this needle, I'm getting paid.
But back to your point though, and this is the runners and sitters piece, because I've done this. I've had cashier contests. Yeah. And what you find is that there are some that are going to absolutely destroy it. Absolutely. They're just wired this way. That way. Yep. And then there's some that are just like going to phone it in. Yeah. And so what you talked about keeping the runners running, make sure that you have runners, that is really important work.
Yes.
Because look at the difference between those two, let's say cashiers, where one is just crushing it and the other is just not even really trying. Yeah. Human nature is a lot like that, right? Can you come to the person who's at the bottom of the stack and go, hey, you know what? I'd like to see you pick your game up. I'd like to see you get up to the top. Yeah. They won't do it.
No, they're not going to do it. Right. And, and I think that's the skill that you learn as an owner is you start to sharpen that of identifying that early on. Mm-hmm. Right. And that goes back into conversations, maybe at your personal conferences. You figure out what their why is, what's really motivating them, right?
Right.
But
not
I think
to say you don't try, but
sure.
It just you've been around enough to know.
Exactly. Yeah. So I do think that, if I'm thinking, and this is totally off the cuff, I haven't even thought about this, but if I'm looking at the E-Myth system, right, you have a technician, a manager, and an entrepreneur. The technician, their IPAs are pretty easy to track, right? And they're going to be like, hey, did you do this checklist at every, did you do this checklist inspection at every appointment this day? Did you, turn in all your receipts at the end of the day and check out, right? Did you do your invoices, right? So it's a pretty easy thing, right? And then I think your manager is going to be more focused to what we just said, is that, your IPAs now are keeping the runners running and getting the joggers to run, and that's really what that becomes. Yeah. And then I think as an entrepreneur, it is your IPA, and this is what I'm kind of finding is really my next season is looking at next moves, acquisitions, what's the next move, right? And then at the same time, keeping the manager in a emotionally healthy place, maybe. I don't know how to say it, right? But you think of the burden that a manager has, right? Because they're stuck in the middle, right? They have a technician that they're trying to motivate, and then they have somebody over them, a lot of cases, that's like, hey, you got to be meeting these numbers. And so they're in this really weird situation or stuck in the middle. Yes. And a lot of that times that can be very, very, they can get burned out. Let me say it that way. Managers can get burned out the quickest because they're like, man, I'm doing everything I can, or I feel like I am, and I can't get these guys to run. So then I think so when I look at that, I think that entrepreneur really is the one that motivates that manager.
It's really interesting, and that's, to be fair, that's a part of the PC that I go through with our store managers, who are phenomenal. We've got great store managers. I'm so proud of them.
I think two of them I referred to you, but whatever.
Thank you.
I might. I was thinking about playing a bad joke and telling them want them to resign, saying they're coming to work for me, but I wouldn't do that to you.
Well, I would cancel the podcast, okay? Because I love those guys. I really do, and they've been they're a joy to work with. I love coming to work with them. Yeah. And ultimately, part of the what you're saying is right, because when you're in that line of fire, and look, I've done that job, and I did that job for many years, running a single unit, and so what you find is that level of self-care is so important, because a big part of the job, at that level, is you're just kind of trying to mitigate problems, and issues are coming up constantly, and people can be petty or they can bicker. And customers can be difficult, and equipment can break, and you just go down the list of things that can happen. And so my encouragement in most of those PCs, or many of the PCs, is, hey, how you sleeping? You getting sleep? Because if we were to, it's funny, I was telling somebody this today, if our society has come up with all these answers to what ails us, and really it's like, well, let's talk about these things. Are you sleeping well? How's your diet? You going out in the sun and sweating? Are you exercising? How's your relationship with God? How's your relationship with your friends and family? And listen, if you don't prescribe to the relationship with God, fine, your own deal, but are you at peace, right?
Yeah.
But those 5 things, like, let's start there before we go into miracle drugs 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Right? Can we just start there?
Yeah. Well, and that's crazy is when I remember the day I talked to Aaron for the first time. He cold called me, our coach, business coach. That day, I sent a message to my doctor and was like, I got to get on some kind of medicine that helps me focus, because I cannot. I'm like sitting here, I know, and it's just piling up on me, and I just can't do anything. And to me, it was like, give me some Adderall. Like, let me cure cancer over here,
Yeah.
And then Aaron ended up cold calling me. I don't even know if I've even told him that story, but it was like, the problem is not, that would be a temporary solution maybe.
Right.
But it was that there wasn't unity in other parts. And that there wasn't, and when we talk about, it's really a holistic approach to living life. Yeah. And that's why you see the employees that bounce around a company to company to company is because they're not. The problem isn't the company.
That's right.
Sometimes it might be, but most times not.
You see what you see is a lot of personal issues that manifest within the company. So the folks will bring it to work with them, and the way they respond to others, the way they deal with others and talk to others. Many times it's just largely influenced from storms that are brewing inside of them. And that just manifests itself, and then it creates this whole problem in your workplace. Yeah. And so again, so to mitigate this, to work on this, to deal with this, to help people get through their things, you've got to be recharged.
You have to be.
Because you cannot do that on an empty,
That's right.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Sure.
So part of that PC that we do work on is I want to know, and I'm going to preach at you in a way, because you got to take care of yourself.
Well, and I like to say, not saying I'm perfect at this, but I like to say, you have to have a time during the day. You have to have a longer space during the week. You have to have maybe a couple of days during the month, and then even like a week during the quarter or the year of just unplugging. Like there has to be a time, right? 15 minutes a day. Start with 5 minutes a day. Yeah. Where you just unplug and you read, right? Read a a devotion, or read an inspirational quote from me or something, but you read, right? And then during the week, like when are you in the week, are you unplugging and not doing something with work, or not having somebody depending on you or calling your name, or right? Yeah. And that has to be scheduled. I know for me, it has to be scheduled. Right. And then what tends to happen is we feel guilty almost. Right? You almost feel guilty, is like, okay, I'm just going to take off Thursday afternoon and just go fishing, or go play golf, or just not be boss and not have kids calling my name, right? Exactly. And but you do feel guilty. You do. And every time. But what we're saying is that is needed. That is the fuel, the re-energizing, because you can't. If you're not motivated as a manager, you're not going to be able to motivate, right? That's right. You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to be burned out. You'll go through the actions, and it actually will hurt you worse. Yeah. And so big picture, we've unpacked these IPAs, and you really said something that I'm learning from you today. Hey, there you go. Your IPA is just keeping your runners running. And really, we're doing the same thing. We're just maybe looking at it differently or calling it something different. But when I talk about my personal conferences with those people and with the managers and basically working on this stuff,
talking about this kind of thing,
Yeah.
and how, then they're able to they've got more energy, and they've got, the ability to regulate their emotions better, and they're able to go back into the storm and work on that person who's bringing all the junk in and spraying it all over everybody, or the thing that's breaking this, that, or the other. So keeping their runners running, them running to the very high level, which it does. It's hard. Being that manager is hard work.
Absolutely.
Taking care of yourself is essential. And so if there's income producing activity for you, you've identified is, I got to take care of these people right here in this way.
Well, you feel bad, right? Because you have to limit who has access to you, right? And so, I'll have a technician call me and be like, hey, I got in a fight with my manager, and, I'm venting, and I'm like, well, look, you got to go talk to your manager and work that out. I'm not stepping in on this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have the capacity to do that. I'm not like, now I'll address it with the manager. Hey, what can we learn from this?
Absolutely.
But, you kind of have to have, because we have limited resources. Our time and our energy is just limited.
Yeah.
Right. And how do you even put a dollar on that when you're at the top of a company?
Yeah.
You don't. And so and I just feel, even talking to David Alvis on the last episode, it makes me anxious to hear that all of these people have his phone number. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, yeah. And listen, you run very successful businesses, and you've got a lot of team members. But when you hear David Alvis talk about his 500 folks, I'm just like, how does that even
I know, right?
work?
Well, and I think that too, one thing that I was encouraged to hear him say is he's present every day, which is convicting. And that they don't fear him showing up. Mm-hmm. They're excited when he's there.
Yeah.
So he is keeping his runners running, not in an authoritative, way, but really in an encouraging way. And that's right. That only comes from experience, and, luckily some of us have fast tracked that because we either had a parent that did it that way, or we learned it that way, or we've, read books that way, but it's not the norm, right?
That's
especially when I'm in the trade industries, he's starting some trade companies, and I'm like, just hearing the way these guys talk to each other, I'm like, especially if you get an employee that used to work in the oil field, you're like, no. He's like, well, that's just how we did it. Right. You cuss them out and tell them how horrible they are. They cuss you out, and then y'all get back to work. That's what you do. And it's like,
it's so funny, man, because we've had people that have come from the oil field, and a lot of them, it's like, man, you just can't talk to people like that.
Yeah. And it's very political, and it's very, it's just like, dude, wild. It's like, I'm going to get to where I need to be by putting other people down. And
there's something there.
Yeah,
I don't
it's crazy.
Know, maybe we could have an oil field person on here to help us unpack it.
Mr. Slumber J?
Yeah, exactly. Because it is interesting. Like, why,
Mr. X?
Why do you find that the mode of communication in that industry to be this way? Is it because politically you've got to, it's competitive? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it that, if not, you're going to get crushed?
Yeah. But then I would also say, do a case study. If you did have a team in the oil industry that did have some strict core values of being a team, functioning as a team, caring about the other person, respecting the people around you, and you did that for 12 months, would their numbers look different?
Would they?
I don't know.
Exactly.
I would imagine so.
Yeah.
I would imagine people would work better and make less mistakes and be happier.
Or they'd be closed.
Yeah. So, but that's a very interesting. So here we go. Oil field. Let's get us an oil field.
I like that.
Let's just start doing the Theo Vaughn thing. It's like oil field worker. Let's just start getting people in here.
Right. My understanding of David Alvis really changed, and I'd always viewed him as someone who, just struck me as very charismatic.
Yeah.
Struck me as very successful, and that just kind of had the Midas touch.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know why.
Yeah.
Other than just being really charismatic. But talking to him, what I pulled out is that no, this guy really does care about his people a lot.
Yeah. Well, and what also tends to happen is you see someone like David who is very successful, and we'll use the comment, everything he touches turns to gold, right? Well, Adam, my business partner at Berkshire Hathaway, Adam Lytle, the smartest real estate mind in our area, I believe. In fact, we need to have him on. he uses this analogy. He loves analogies, right? Sometimes they get graphic, but he loves analogies. He says, you know, when you start your career, you're pushing a boulder up a hill. And at some point, you get to the top of the hill, and now you have gravity pushing the boulder for you. Now, for some people, it takes them 3 years to get to the top. Some people, it takes 10 years, right? But what we like to see is the people that are that the boulder's going down the hill and they have gravity working for them. And we're like, wow, these guys, I mean, this is so easy for them. But we didn't see him, right? We didn't see him when he was 10 years in, the first 10 years.
Exactly.
Because like, we were like, well, when did your second restaurant start? Well, it was 12 years after the first one.
Yeah.
And then since then, he's opened like 6 and 5 years, right?
With more plans.
Exactly. And so it just goes downhill.
Yeah.
And we just live in a culture where we are not willing to wait.
Right.
We do not want to use the crock pot. We want to microwave that sucker and eat in 30 seconds.
That's right.
Right. And so then that's when you see a lot of the people that are young, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. I like to spend my money. I like nice things, but you know, sometimes they forego the future, you know, what they want, what their life looks like in the future to get some instant gratification.
Yeah.
So,
But it is very true that a lot of people don't understand, for those who just seem to have it just, it's like the ideal wheel analogy is that the wheel is round, but it's very big. And so that can just roll like much more efficiently.
Yeah.
Well, that's because all the work that has been put in to make that wheel super round.
Oh yeah.
And for David Alvis, obviously if you talk to him, he's like, man, I care about my team and I care about my customers, and I'm going to work really hard on building those things out.
Yeah.
And
I love it. And I love, you know, when he mentioned several times about being clean.
Yeah.
Right. They take the catering van, they wash it first. Like the consumer only notices when it's not done. Right. Mm-hmm. You walk into a place and say, wow, this place is dirty. You don't walk into a place and say, like, this place is really clean.
That's right.
Because you expect it to be clean.
Yeah.
Right. And so really on a core level, he's just meeting expectations.
Right.
And, you know, you have bad experiences, and I've mentioned it before, but the consumer's expectation and your expectation, the difference between the two is disappointment.
Yeah.
And so you got to get to where your expectation and their expectations are meeting.
Well, and doesn't it make sense that if the restaurant is just immaculate, that the au gratins are going to taste the same every time?
Yeah.
Doesn't those two things track together? Yeah. Right? I mean, it's attention to detail.
Well, and you think through the Chick-fil-A and McDonald's. Right? Why is it that when I'm drop the kids off of school and Chick-fil-A already has a line backing up the interstate, right? And McDonald's across the street has one car in it.
Yeah.
However, they're a third of the price to eat at McDonald's? Why are these people spending so much money to eat at Chick-fil-A when it's just food? It's going to fill you up. And now Chick-fil-A food is great, but when's the last time you went to Chick-fil-A and it was dirty? It's not. It's clean. You walk into McDonald's, wow, this place is gross, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's like, hey, the secret is just like meeting those expectations.
Yeah.
And, you know, so like, you know, if you're out in the field, like wear a uniform. You know, look, I'm a guy that just wears T-shirts most days. I dressed up for today's podcast, put on my button down.
Is that Dockers?
Sell at JCPenney's. So anyways, but yeah, so like, you know, you kind of go, because they don't know that you failed their expectations until you fail it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like they just expect you to show up and look professional and to be organized and be prepared. And when you do that, nothing's going to, their senses aren't going to go up, right? They're like, wow, they did a good job. Yeah. But if you go below their expectation, there's going to be disappointment. Yeah. And it leads back to bad reviews.
Well, absolutely. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. You go. But you know, you because you own a business, when you do, you're always kind of walking in and looking around, and you're looking around a little bit differently. You are. I notice that if I'm with my friends, sometimes I'm making comments or saying things that they're kind of like, why do you care, man? Yeah. I'm like, look how tight these napkins are. They look really good.
Well, it's funny, like people come over to the house and I'm like, that picture on the wall is crooked. You know, it's like, I never noticed it being crooked before, but now somebody's coming over, right? Or like you invite a friend to your church and you look through a different lens, for sure. right?
That's
Because
right.
you're perceiving it through a different lens. And so that's why that's huge. That's why I'm like, man, you need to put yourself in those situations, right?
Yep.
You need to go visit a competitor store.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Good stuff, man.
And here's another one, just another tidbit. This one's free, a little nugget. If you're in sales and you don't get the sale, you have got to call and ask why. That is how you're going to grow and learn. And that is painful as all get out. But if you're going on a competitive listing appointment, Adam always tells the story. He's like, yeah, early on I went to this listing and I just had the paperwork nailed. I mean, I just blew it out of the water, and they picked somebody else. And I called and they said, well, you wore shorts to the appointment. And he's like, I've never gone in shorts since.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the kind of stuff, like, that is invaluable information you have got to get. And we avoid it because we don't want the pain.
That's right.
And so, but that's just huge. If you don't get the sale, call and ask why.
Yeah. I like that. Very good.
It's huge.
And that's hard to do.
Hard to do.
Ooh, I'm just clenching.
Hard to do. So hard to do. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, look. I'm excited that summer's coming to an end. We're about to have some nice weather.
Me too.
Football season.
We're talking about maybe taking a few months off
Okay.
to end the year, just to regroup, regather our energy.
We'll see. But look, if the listeners want it, we're going to keep giving it. Right?
Those reviews keep pouring in.
The reviews keep pouring in.